sitting in a quiet place, surrounded by this perfect grace. My higher self I now embrace, beyond the realms of time and space, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside, sitting in a quiet place, surrounded by this perfect grace. My higher self I now embrace, beyond the realms of time and space, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside. Surrounded by this perfect grace, my higher self I now embrace, beyond the realms of time and space, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside. The sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside, and the sea of love, yes, the sea of love grows inside.
Let us take 3 deep, conscious, healing breaths together. We quiet ourselves. We go into that quiet place. That quiet place known by many, many names. God, the kingdom of God, the one presence, heaven, peace, the Christ mind, the Buddha mind, the heart of peace that passes all human understanding. We allow ourselves to deepen into that place, that consciousness that we always have access to. I invite you to close your eyes if you haven't already, as we hear these words one more time. We sit in this quiet place, this consciousness, surrounded by perfect grace. hearts and minds are open. We embrace that higher self, the awakened self. We allow ourselves to feel this place, this consciousness that goes beyond time, beyond space, beyond history, past, or future. It is this one moment, this one eternal moment. And we give ourselves over to what many see as the one reason we've come here. To know love and to be loved. To express the highest love that we know. So we give ourselves over to our spiritual practices, to our places of quiet and silence and meditation, or simply pondering. How does peace feel? How does happiness feel? How does love feel? To allow ourselves to be that as we take these few quiet moments together. Into this healing consciousness that we create together. You remember all those that we're holding in our hearts in prayer. And if it feels comfortable to speak their names out loud, please do so now. Susan Bowles, Dick Bowles, and Richard Bowles. Lester. All those who've written in for prayer, called in, texted. The world events that sometimes break our hearts. Our global family everywhere. All nations. Huge cities, tiny villages, all those meeting in mosques and synagogues, cathedrals, dance circles, drum circles, the community gatherings, people coming together to help and support and encourage one another. We bless all life on this planet, the four-leggeds, the winged ones, the finned ones, our oceans and rivers and tributaries and creeks, our air, our mountains. All life, so many forms of life, expressed by the one presence, the one creative presence, known by many names. With gratitude, we say, so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste. And now everybody say, let there be light. Watch what happens. You didn't say it, you have to say it. Let there be light.
Let there be light.
Because the biggest light is not the one with the switch, is it? To the one biker that did come to visit last Sunday. I thought the church would be packed with motorcycle people, but then I realized it's for the next door church. But if the music is loud enough, maybe they'll come over. So we were talking, he and I, last week about Hafiz, and by the way, he's a member at Unity of Greensboro, and he comes here every year, he said. We were talking about Hafiz, and I found a poem today that I thought would be good as we talk about healing together. You know, we talked about healing last Sunday with Myrtle Fillmore, and we're going to continue that today. I see people shivering. Do we need to kick it up a little bit? The temperature, I mean? Yeah, we don't want shivering people. Okay. You're roasting? Oh, then don't touch it. Okay, here we are. We're mostly in this age group where the temperature levels go up and down. Okay. So Hafiz says, keep watch. So let's talk about that. Keep watch. Hafiz says, in the morning when I began to wake, it happened again. That feeling that you, beloved, had stood over me all night keeping watch. That feeling that as soon as I began to stir, you put your lips on my forehead and lit a holy lamp inside my heart. The one presence, the one beautiful presence. We have so many names for the one beautiful presence. What a gift. What a wonderful blessing of healing when we feel that one presence around us, so much so that we can feel the kiss of Spirit on our forehead. That we can feel an embrace around us as if we're being held by a tender, loving mother or a beautiful father, or the one presence that holds us when our hearts are breaking. And here's the hitch. Our part is to open up our hearts and minds to this idea so that we can experience it. And for me, this is the highest form of healing. And for me, the times I needed most to feel this were the times I could feel it most powerfully. That's the way that works. When we think our hearts are breaking the most, sometimes we want to get back under the covers. But just for fun, experiment with this idea. My heart is sad, my heart is breaking. I'm going to open myself to feel the one presence. The one presence that we call love and peace, God, Spirit. Let ourselves feel it. Just like when we go into a little creek or river or swimming pool, and you know, we can sometimes just pause and feel that cold water just move over us. Sometimes that's the way Spirit is. But what we adorable human beings often do, I mean, I've never done it, but maybe some of you have, is when things are the hardest, that's when we most need to open, but what's the tendency?
Close.
So just something to think about, and the idea of healing, because that's what we're talking about today, healing from a new thought perspective. And if you're interested in the topic and want to keep the conversation going, then after service today is our third Sunday, Connect the Dots. We'll form a little circle up here after you get your coffee and tea and sweets, and come on back up here and we'll continue talking about this idea because it's a huge topic. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity Movement. You remember last week I read to you from her letter about her own healing. I won't read the whole thing again today, but just a few highlights for those of you who missed this last Sunday. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, she said, I have made what seems to be a discovery. I was fearfully sick. And then I was thinking about life. And I thought life has to be guided by intelligence in making everything that's been made. That makes sense? And intelligence guided the formation of all things. Life is simply a form of energy, Myrtle Fillmore said. This was long before the quantum physicist started helping us understand that it's all energy. So life is just a form of energy and directed by my intelligence. So I told my liver, my stomach, my abdomen that I was alive with the energy of God. Let's all say that together. I am alive with the energy of God. I told my limbs that they were active and strong. I told my eyes that they were young, clear, bright eyes because the light of God shone right through them. I went to all of my life centers in my body and spoke to every one of them the words of strength and power. I asked their forgiveness for the foolish, ignorant course that I had pursued in the past when I had condemned them and called them weak, inefficient, and diseased. Something to think about. How do we talk to ourselves? How do we talk to our bodies? When we look in the mirror, what do we say? Gorgeous. And it has to be with a New York accent. Gorgeous. And then she says, I promised God that I would never again retard the free flow of life through my mind and my body by any false word or thought. I have some work to do. I don't know about you, but I have some work to do. I promised God that I would never again, and here's the kicker, retard the flow of life energy by my false words or thoughts. That I would always bless my life and encourage my life, and I would use all diligence and intelligence and wisdom in telling my body and my mind the highest wisdom. Ooh, do y'all have some work to do too?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Just today. So we pause and we reflect and we say, maybe I don't want to say that about my body. Maybe I don't want to say that about my memory. Maybe I don't want to say that about my memory. Maybe I don't want to say that.
What did you say?
Has it flipped through all the slides already? No. It has? Yeah. Well, so I don't need to do the talk? Okay, so Myrtle. And then she gave that great little analogy about the lilies in the pond and the roots of the lily down in the mud and making this bright, beautiful, beautiful lily. And she said that the lily doesn't know that the roots in the earth are required for life. So we're not going to say that some darkness and some mud aren't going to happen, but we are saying that how we interpret what happens in the darkness and the mud affects everything. And when Unity says we create our life experiences with our thoughts, means we're creating the experience by the way we interpret the experience. We're creating the experience by the way we think about the experience. Because life is going to happen. Have you noticed?
Yep.
Yeah. Life is going to happen. So we can be miserable by the way we view our life events, or we can look at our life events as the possibility or the opportunity to go deeper, to awake more. It requires a little work, though. You can't just read the book or see the movie. You have to actually practice, right? And we love to practice. Okay, so healing. These are some of the ideas that I kind of gleaned from the New Thought perspective of what healing is. Healing is associated with themes of wholeness and spiritual awareness. Oh, yeah. Okay. Healing is an intensely personal, subjective experience. I want to repeat that. Healing is an intensely personal, subjective experience. None of us have the right to say, well, you're not healed yet. We experience our wholeness in many, many ways, and only we as individuals know when we feel we're experiencing our wholeness. An intensely personal, subjective experience involving a reconciliation of the meaning an individual ascribes to distressing events with his or her perception of wholeness as a person. So let's break that down a little bit. If I'm feeling less than, which happened back in 1963, if I'm feeling less than, anybody ever danced with that? So if I'm feeling less than, and a life event happens, Let's say a loss of a job, or loss of a relationship, or a beloved. Or let's say just world events. I'm feeling sad and full of anxiety with world events. So let's say I'm not feeling my own wholeness. Am I going to interpret what's happening in my life or in the world from a high perspective?
No.
No. I'm going to interpret it from a place of fear or feeling less than. So I have to do my practice to feel my wholeness so that when life happens, I can remember, as this English poet said, I can remember what I know in the light. When I'm having those dark moments, I can pull that forth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
To one who waits, all things reveal themselves, so long as you have the courage not to deny in the darkness what you have seen in the light. So my practice involves knowing my wholeness, so that when life events happen, I'm ascribing an interpretation. I'm giving myself over to the highest awareness of the opportunity for healing in the event. And I know that's the first question we always go to, right? Life happens, something upsets us, and we say, oh, I wonder what healing is happening for me now. That's the first place we go, right? Right? And therein lies the practice. So, this man, Paul Hasselbeck, how many of you have had a Unity class with him? You've been to Unity Village, or you've had a class with him? Paul Hasselbeck, he's written this book, Point of Power. He, somebody bless me. Okay, so Paul Hasselbeck, Point of Power. He has an interesting story, y'all. He was a dentist, and in the mid-'80s, he was a dentist who gave some care to a man who was HIV positive. And during the treatment, he was pierced with a needle and infected. Now, so I'll take a deep breath. That's a major life event. And he tells the story in 1.5 pages at the beginning of this book. But I personally know him, and I know it took a lot of years for him to work with this. It changed his entire life. But here's what he says. When I got the diagnosis, I was fortunate because I had been studying a spiritual teaching called A Course in Miracles. And I had a spiritual perspective that helped me shift from asking the why question. Life events happen, don't we often say, why is this happening to me? Why did God do this to me? Why would God let this happen? Those are some of the questions that we ask. He moved from why to the question, how? I began to make the shift to asking, how can I express and learn love more through this? Now, it took him a while to get there, but he got there. He says he moved from dealing with the HIV diagnosis from a psychological level to dealing with the diagnosis from an ontological level, meaning knowing himself as a spiritual being having a life event. A spiritual being first. I began to ask in my prayer and meditations, okay, God, now that I have HIV in my life, how can I use it to learn love more? And then he met a man named Dr. Jerry Jampolsky. And he went out to California to study what was called, and still is, attitudinal healing. And I think from time to time, we all need to sign up for that. Attitudinal healing. It was a place that children could openly share about their diagnoses, their life situations, their terminal illnesses, and their impending deaths. It was originally set up for children. It's everybody now. It is a system of beliefs that, when embraced, will shift a person's attitude. I list the principles here for you, and so I put them up on the PowerPoint. Is the life event? Okay, healing. This is what the attitudinal healing people say is going on when healing's happening. Because how many of us think of healing as simply being a physical cure? And how many of us know that healing is so much bigger than a physical cure? Healing, knowing that the essence of our being is love. This is what they work with people with terminal illness, with the attitudinal healing. To remember that the essence of us is love. And when we know the essence of our wholeness, which is love, we let go of fear. We can't hold on to fear when we know our wholeness and when we know that we are loved. If we only have one and two, we only have one. The essence of who we are is love, beyond all my life events. And if I let go of fear, that's what I tap into. Health is inner peace. Let's take a deep breath on that. We can get a clean bill of health from the MD. But if our hearts are heavy, if our hearts are feeling cut off from this essence of love, then we don't know about healing. Giving and receiving are the same in healing. We give ourselves over to the process, we receive the energy, we give ourselves over to support and love from other people, and we receive that love. We become a part of, that infinity loop. The healer and the healee are both receiving and giving. Just like in these times that we get together, we're giving and receiving all the time. All of us. And when we're in the healing process, we learn to let go of the past and the future. I'll pause while we do that. Part of the practice is to let go of the detrimental energy and feelings that have to do with anything that happened in the past or anything we're forecasting for the future. For example, that storm last week. How many people called to tell me, we need to close church because it's going to be a major tropical storm? I said, really?
Really?
How many people called me to say, nobody's going to show up for church, you're canceling it, right? And I said, just a minute, I'm going to turn off the Weather Channel and I'm going to go look outside. Well, we had church and it was packed. It was beautiful. So, we learn to let go of past and future, the future forecasting of how bad is it going to be. Because I would like to change the future forecast. If you still want to hang out in the future, how good can it be?
Amen.
I want to practice that.
It's as good or as bad as you make it.
Okay, say that one more time.
I said it's as good or as bad as you yourself make it. So therefore, that's why your thinking has to change and your inside work needs to be done.
You mean we have to do inside work?
Ah.
You mean we have to do inside work? You mean we have to do inside work? Couldn't I just pay somebody to do it for me? Back in the days when you could hire somebody to go off and fight in the war for you. Couldn't one of you just take care of my spiritual work for me? Oh, okay. So, then, in the healing process, we learn to love ourselves and others by forgiving rather than judging. That's healing. So much bigger than cure for the body. We can become love finders rather than fault finders.
Ooh.
Wow, just that one. We can work on that all month, all year, our lives. We become love finders rather than fault finders. And look how long this list. This is it, 12 concepts. Then we can choose and direct ourselves to be peaceful inside, regardless of what is happening outside. I mean, the personal work that's involved in doing this, the proverbial, thank you, Dora, the proverbial hailstorm that moves around us from time to time. And that is a great practice. You know, give thanks for the hailstorm, because it's wonderful practice to deepen into these ideas, to choose peace regardless of what's going on around us. Like that story where David and I are at the LA airport and the snipers are shooting at the planes way back during the Rodney King trial. And we just sat down on the floor along with everybody else. And that's when David had his flashback to Vietnam. Somehow from our spiritual practice we knew to go inside and feel the peace regardless of what was happening around us. And for David it was a double whammy. The shots going on literally outside the airport, but also on the inside, he was in a memory of being shot at. Somehow his practice kicked in. When I say somehow, the practice will kick in as we give ourselves over to it. We practice, 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 and then there comes a moment when the snipers are firing at the airplanes. And the practice kicks in. And he had to go deep, beyond the literal what was happening, beyond the deep of what was happening from the flashback to that place of accessing the peace. See, we can all do that. But what I found is, I can't do it so simply if I'm not practicing enough.
Mm-hmm.
We are students and teachers to each other. Look around and see who's pushing your buttons right now and give thanks for them. Because they're teaching you to access your peace, and that's true healing. We can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragments. I mean, this list was made up for children and families where the children were terminal. This was a list for the parents to work with and the families to work with as much as the children. We can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragments, the little pieces that break our hearts. Open up to the wider view. Open up to the wider view. And since love is eternal, death need not be viewed as fearful. There is no death. And lastly, we can perceive ourselves and others as either extending love or giving a call for help. So think about the people that have been hard for you lately. Maybe it's been yourself. And are we perceiving others and ourselves from extending love, or perhaps we or others are asking for love? What does this all have to do with healing? I thought healing was just curing the cancer or curing the heart ailment.
Love is the healer.
Love is the healer. Thank you so much, Paula. So, when we talk about healing from a new thought perspective, we're talking about the personal work. And somebody said to me recently, actually, Bunny, it was the biker last week. He said he'd never been to a church before where they talked so much about personal work. I said, well, that's interesting, because one of my goals, and David's too, over the last 20, 30 years, has been to get Unity to talk more about the personal work. But I think that could be true of all churches. Because the days of blame are done. The days of responsibility have begun.
Mm-hmm.
We respond to the Spirit within us, and we do our personal work, because that's the only place we're going to know God. We can have the most beautiful church in the world, the most beautiful cathedral or synagogue or mosque. We can have the beautiful walls, but if we aren't doing the personal work, it ain't happening. We cannot have peace on earth without the peace in here. Does that make sense?
Amen.
Yeah, I feel like I'm preaching. So I'm going to end with this one story, and some of you have heard it before. It's a good story. It needs to be repeated. About the doctor in Santa Barbara, our friend Stephen Hosea, who went into one of the hospital rooms at Cottage Hospital there in Santa Barbara, and the young man also had AIDS back in the mid-80s. And this young man was alone. And Stephen looked into his eyes and said, tell me, what does your wisdom say we should do, because I've done everything I know to do as your doctor. And the first miracle of the story is that he would ask the question, What does your wisdom say we should do? And this young man paused. That's a good thing. He reflected on the question, and then he said, will you hold me? And this medical doctor, the first thought he had was, I've got a lot of rounds to do, got a lot of people to see. But he made a decision, he said, shifted him from being a medical doctor to being a healer. And he climbed up in bed with that young man and he held him. He held him for 2 hours. Because I later said to him, 20 minutes would have been powerful. And he said, and this is the healing presence we started out talking about, he said, I could not move. He said, I was holding this young man, but there was something bigger holding us. Whatever your words are for that, God, healing, peace, one presence. He said he couldn't move, but here's the deal, he didn't want to move. He could feel the loving presence. And at the end of 2 hours, the family was arriving, siblings, parents, friends, community, and Dr. Stephen looked up at them and said, now you do this part. And they all took turns holding him for the next 11 hours. Now, here's the deal. This young man's family had cast him out many years before that. This young man's family had excommunicated him from the heart of love. And so, for them to even be there was powerful. But that they would get up in bed one by one and take turns holding him. That was the miracle. The miracle of love and acceptance, of embrace into the community when there have been many years of not receiving that. This young man's body died 11 hours later. He was surrounded by family and friends and community. Now, was his body cured of the complications of AIDS? No. Did healing happen?
Yes.
I want to hear a giant yes.
Yes.
Healing happened, and that's what we need to remember. We see our children suffering. We see our community suffering. We watch the suffering of ourselves. I want us all to remember, me included, because sometimes we focus on the suffering or we focus on the diagnosis. I want us to know that healing is always happening. Always happening. When is healing happening?
Always.
It's always happening. Always. That's the big clue. We are swimming in the spirit life energy. We're swimming in the energy of healing and wholeness. That's what we're living in, breathing, and it's moving through every cell and atom of our being. That's what we are. So the events happen, and they will. Diagnoses come. Life changes. Our beautiful life partners begin to move away from us. Life happens. And so we want to remember what's holding us through all of it. The embrace of love, the embrace of peace, the embrace of this one presence. That's healing when we can open up to that. That's healing. So let's take a deep breath. We're remembering now all those we're holding in our hearts of prayer, and we simply hold them in the space of knowing healing is happening. And sometimes that means cure for the body. It always means healing for the soul, healing for the heart, the understanding. We are eternal spiritual beings. We always have been, we always will be. Healing is happening always. And we say, so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.